بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه الطاهرين ما دام ما في السماوات والأرضين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم إنا نسألك علما ينفعنا ويرفعنا اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وعملا متقبلا وشفاء من كل داء وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we thank and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His many blessings that He has bestowed upon us, and we beseech Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in those blessings. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessing of Islam wa kafa biha ni'mah, and sufficient it is as a blessing. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for making us from amongst the followers of His beloved messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a blessing that I've been writing a bit about, by extension of being Muslim and by extension of being from amongst the followers of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in today's day and age, we are blessed and fortunate from many perspectives to belong to this particular Muslim community on the southernmost tip of Africa. It is indeed a blessing. If we look at in as far as diasporas go, then this particular diaspora, this particular Muslim minority stands out. If we look at other Muslim minorities, which was very much established at the same time, so many years later, 350 years and more later, we find that this Muslim community is still extant. Whereas others that have started at the same time, for reason best known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they haven't subsisted over time. One of those would be the community established in South America, Brazil, Salvador. In 1835 there was a revolt, and as a result of the revolt, the Muslims were there, the Muslim community, rather flourishing Muslim community, was basically exterminated, and the Muslim community came to an end really. Whereas our community subsisted by the grace and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in today's time, with what's all happening in the, if you look at Eastern Islam and look at Western Islam, we might not realize it, but there's a lot of Western Muslims that look to Cape Town as an example. It's quite unique. I was reading a book written by Sheikh Abdul Ghani al-Nabulsi. He's a very famous scholar, and he has many works that he has written. He went into a self-imposed exile for some 7 years. He also has a book that talks about uzla, isolation. So there's always this idea of, do you mix with people or do you not mix with people? What is more beneficial? And I think the answer is very simple. You look to the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He didn't choose isolation. He chose to be with the people. So no matter how difficult it is sometimes to interact with people, because it comes with its own challenges. You can avoid all of these challenges by isolating yourself. But isolation wasn't the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His was the way of being with people. So despite the fact that it's challenging to be with people, and you can use yourself as a major premise, your colleagues at work, it's easier to keep a distance. And yes, there must be space in the togetherness, but there's a greater reward in mixing with people. It's sometimes easier, even when it comes to family, to take a back step, and it's easier. But the Prophet ﷺ, he chose to be with people. So he wrote a book about this, and it's been translated into English. And in the introduction of that, because isolating yourself isn't something practical, but what is perhaps practical, the translator suggests in the introduction to the book, is that this place where you find yourself in might not be suitable. So don't choose the isolation option, perhaps choose a better environment, an Islamic environment for yourself and for your family. So these are writers writing in the West. West would be Europe and West would be the Americas. So they suggest, as opposed to isolating yourself and you want to go to a place that would facilitate for your Islamic well-being, then they point out Cape Town as such a location. So sometimes we don't realize. And then there's a I think it's, the essays is called Traveling Home. It's a number of essays written by Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with him. He's the basically director in terms of the CMC, Cambridge Muslim College. And he's Habib Ali Jifri refers to him as the Ghazali ul-Gharb. The Ghazali in terms of a thinker and philosopher of the Western Islam, in other words, Western Muslims. So he's very well, he's an academic, and he's also very academic, and he manages to balance academia out with spirituality, and very traditional, very traditional. So he has an introduction to his book, and so you can have a book and you have different versions, publications of the book. So when Sheikh Siraj Hendricks from the Zawiya passed away, so then he dedicated that introduction and that publication, the forward, to Sheikh Siraj, and he spoke about the Cape Town Muslim community. So he says, in as far as Islam goes in the West, so geographically we're not in the West, but we sort of counted amongst the West. He says, number one, Islam here is much older than Islam in the West, in Europe. Even if you look at ourselves here, Islam on the southernmost tip of Africa is 350 odd years old, whereas up north, Joburg and Durban, 150 years or a little bit more, but here it's much longer. So then we compare ourselves with Cape Town specifically, with in the West, much older. So if you're much older, then the younger, nascent communities, they're going to look almost like to their older brother to see what Islam should look like after so many years. And then where are they going to look to? They're going to look to Cape Town. And he talks about that. And then also from an outside perspective, he talks about a very unique type of thing that we have going over here. That we didn't adopt apartheid, but we also didn't choose assimilation. And from his perspective, and may Allah reify his words, because it's a good thought that he has about the people of Cape Town, he said that they became servants of the people here, and that led really to the continued progression and flourishment of the community. So I just thought about that idea since we were writing a little bit about it, that we thank Allah for making us Muslims, and we thank Allah for making us followers of Muhammad. And in today's time, we are indeed fortunate because of the religious freedoms that we have. Not to say there's no work to be done. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes we talk about our good fortune. It shouldn't blind us to our faults and the improvements that we need to make. But at the same time also, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. It's a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's good to speak about it and mention about it every now and then. And since I was a little bit writing about this particular point, it was top of mind probably. So I thought let us mention that. We continue with our reading of Mataratul Qulub. And as a matter of interest, Mataratul Qulub is what we're doing is Nukhbatul Matlub min Sharh Mataratul Qulub. We have a visiting scholar from Mauritania, Sheikh Muhammad al-Mishri. I think he arrived today. And he's going to also have a class every day at 5 o'clock at the Imam Qurani Institute at 98 Riversdale Road for about half an hour or so. It's also dealing with the same text. It's just going to be translated. So if you wanted to, on a daily basis, it's only for 4 days, I think, or 5 days, up until September the 4th, that they will be having this class. So it's also, if you wanted to, there's an opportunity for us to benefit. So again, we're fortunate from that side also, because on a regular basis, we have visiting scholars. All we have to do is basically take benefit from them. Inshallah, So we continue with the reading, and the last point we discussed was the purification of the heart, according to Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, is an individual obligation. In other words, it's compulsory upon everybody. Like it's compulsory for you and I to pray, to fast, to pay our alms tax, and if you are able to perform the pilgrimage, the lesser and the major pilgrimage. Likewise, according to Imam Ghazali, it's an individual obligation on every single person to purify their hearts, meaning that they rid themselves of the lesser qualities and embellish themselves with the higher qualities. And this is premised on a particular basis, and that basis is that spiritual defects is intrinsic to the human being, and because it is intrinsic to the human being, therefore it is a must for him to rid himself of those spiritual ailments. So before listing the spiritual ailments through the poet, the Sheikh Ahmad al-Khadim, he explains to us a little bit and gives us somewhat of a list of what are the qualities that you must rid yourself of and what are the qualities that you must embellish yourself with. So he's going to give you a few lists. The first list is a very basic list. You can count on our fingers. And the other one is quite an exhaustive list, which I think is quite interesting because from the outset it gives us an appreciation of what are the good qualities, a list, and what are the bad qualities, and there's a list. So he starts off by quoting, firstly before that, he says, Su'ila Abu Muhammad Abdullah al-Razi, Ma balun nas, what is it with people? In other words, what is it with us? Ya'rifuna uyubahum, they know their defects, they know their weaknesses. وَلَا يَرْجُعُونَ إِلَى الصَّوَابِ, but knowing their weaknesses, it doesn't cause them to rid themselves of these weaknesses. So why does it happen? What are the causes thereof? So he answered and said, the reason for that is, and this is a very important reason, إِنَّهُمْ اشْتَغَلُوا بِالْمُبَاهَاتِ بِالْعِلْمِ, they have busied themselves with competing with one another in terms of apparent knowledge. وَلَمْ يَشْتَغِلُوا بِاسْتِعْمَالِهِ, and they have not preoccupied themselves with employing that knowledge, using the knowledge. So you and I, we discuss, what comes to mind now would be witr, because after Isha. So we will have a lengthy discussion in terms of whether it is just recommended or whether it is actually obligatory. And you will bring the proofs to support the one view, and I will bring the proofs to support the other view. And my idea is that I must bring such proofs, right, that renders your argument null and void, and you have the same preoccupation. But both of us will not make witr. So we've busied ourselves with the acquisition of knowledge, and we haven't practiced on knowledge. The brothers are okay with that understanding. And then something unique that you might hear what the scholars say, and this Sheikh Mukhtar al-Maghrawi, he's still living, he gave his students the following advice, because they're coming now to study, and Islamic studies at a higher level, minimum it will take you about 7 years. He says the moment your acquisition of knowledge takes you away from Allah, as opposed to taking you towards Allah, then stop studying. Who are we talking about? We're talking about a person who's registered at an institution of Islamic higher learning. The advice is that if your acquisition of knowledge starts taking you away from Allah, as opposed to taking closer to Allah, then stop studying. So yes, us, how come? We know. But we know our defects, but we're not ridding ourselves of those defects. It's because, we're acquiring knowledge for knowledge, not for practice. So this is an important consideration to keep in mind. Now, another idea comes to mind, which I read about before, Ali Sab. If you know something is wrong, for example, there's certain defects that you know it's wrong, and when you apply yourself through your rationalization of the defect, you can rid yourself thereof. For example, a person has a habit of drinking. So now he drinking and driving is harmful to you and harmful to everybody else. Then he realizes when he drinks, and what happens is that I'm not saying I lose my sanity. And that weans him off from drinking. In other words, rationally, he came to the conclusion that drinking is bad, and he weans himself off from drinking. So, then there are certain other types of sins that you know it's harmful. For example, like getting angry unnecessarily. You know it's bad, but you find yourself, when the right triggers are there, you still get angry. And anger, as explained a number of times, the first part of it is madness and the last part is regret. So just rationalizing and explaining to yourself the harms of anger still doesn't wean you off from becoming angry. You still find yourself becoming angry. And that is the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated certain acts of worship, like fasting, for example. When you fast, what happens? You find that your ego is weakened. And in that weakened state, you find now that it doesn't have this propensity to become angry. All along you knew anger wasn't good, but you couldn't rid yourself of the anger. But how did you rid yourself of the anger? Not through rationalizing the fact that it's wrong. That works for certain types of sins, but it doesn't work for other types of sin. So why it's coming to mind is because the question is being asked. So to rid yourself of certain types of sins, it means it's a different exercise and regime that you need to subject yourself to in order for you to rid yourself of those types of sins. Just knowing that it's a bad thing, even realizing the consequences thereof, is not enough to wean you off of it. You have to go through some, like fasting. During the month of Ramadan, why do you find that you don't have the tendency to do certain things that you do otherwise? Or it's easier for you to not do those wrong things. You know in Ramadan and after Ramadan that is bad. But in Ramadan, somehow or the other, you have the ability to abstain. But outside Ramadan, you don't have the ability. So the point being that just knowledge of something in and of itself is, in many instances, not enough to wean you off from that particular sin, and Allah SWT knows is best. So, but in as far as the kitab is concerned, is that people acquire knowledge, but they don't practice upon the knowledge. Therefore, of no benefit. وَاشْتَغَلُوا بِالظَّوَاهِرِ وَلَمْ يَشْتَغِلُوا بِأَدَابِ الْبَوَاطِنِ. They have busied themselves with the external acts of worship, and they haven't busied themselves with the internal state. And the internal state is, both are important, the esoteric and the exoteric, but it starts from the external and goes to the internal, and there's a symbiosis, not one at the expense of the other. But here a person who's simply concerned about praying, but he doesn't concern himself of his condition within the prayer, his internal connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he doesn't pay attention to that. فَأَعْمَى اللَّهُ تَعَالَى قُلُوبَهُمْ. So then, as a result of it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes their hearts to become blind. This is very unique, because what is happening? The person is busying himself with the external acts of worship, but internally there's no connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So imagine such a person, his whole life is spent in the apparent obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but his heart is not connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then Allah blinds his heart, causes his heart to be blind. May Allah protect us. وَقَيَّدَ جَوَارِحَهُمْ عَنِ الْعِبَادَاتِ. And it could very well be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stops your limbs because you don't have an internal connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ultimately, He will prevent you from performing even the external acts of worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. قال في الشرح ولما كانت يعني أمراض القلوب لا تنحصر اكتفيت بالأهم ليقاس عليه غيره كما فعل ابن شأس وغيره. He says that since the diseases of the heart can't really be counted, he says I'm going to limit myself by making a small list, like other scholars have made a very small list. So it's going to give us a small list, and inshallah I think in what remains of our time together today, we will look at the small list, and then inshallah I think it's a good idea just to have some sort of a executive coverage of what the good qualities are and what the bad qualities are. We can go through the list, but for now, let's go through the short list. So he says, Anna man salima, the person who is free of the following. So he starts the list now. What must you be free of? And we know this particular approach, right? Because what do? Is it first important to embellish yourself with good qualities or to rid yourself of the lesser qualities? It's important to rid yourself of the lesser qualities first and then embellish yourself with good qualities. It's like you have a garment of clothing. The clothing is dirty. Are you first going to stay off the clothing or are you first going to wash it? You're first going to wash the clothing and then stay off. So in terms of progress, spiritual progress, the first is to rid yourself of lesser qualities and then you embellish yourself with the good qualities. So he says, Man salima min bukhlin. The person who is safe from or who rids himself of bukhl. Bukhl is miserliness. Quite interesting that he mentions at first. Wa ujbin. So the list, and we think about the list. Ujbin would be vanity. That a person thinks much of themselves. Wa kibrin. Pride. So pride is when you basically look down on others, like the Prophet ﷺ explained, and that explanation will come later in the book in detail. Batarul haqq wa ghamtun nas. What is pride? Pride is when the truth is told to you and then you refuse to accept it. That is pride. Wa ghamtun nas, and looking down on people. So if you have more money than somebody else, then that's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if that causes you to think much of yourself and you look down on others who have less than you, then that is referred to as pride. So the first one would be miserliness, ujub, vanity, kibr, which is pride, wariya, ostentation, which is the non-existence of sincerity. When a person does something, only does it to show others. Now, wa hasad, jealousy. Allah has blessed somebody with some form of gift. You wish to have that gift and that person must be deprived of the same. That is referred to as jealousy. Wa hubbi jahin, and love of jah. Jah refers to power and station. No. Wa malin, and love of wealth. And here the scholars Imam Ghazali, and when we discuss it at a later stage, will probably mention that between the two, what is the more potent? Power and prestige, or is it wealth? He says the more dangerous of the two is not wealth, but rather it is power. So somebody has a lot of wealth, but he seeks to have power. And if you have power, you automatically have wealth. Whereas if you have wealth, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have power. Yeah. So this we'll discuss as we go along, inshallah. وَشِدَّةُ غَضَبٍ. So a person who is safe of all of these qualities. شِدَّةُ غَضَبٍ. Undue anger. A person, is the best type of people is a person that takes long to get angry and quick to resolve his anger. And the worst type of person is the person who's quick to anger and long to resolve his anger. He's quick to get angry and then he's in an angry state for an extended period of time. Worst type of person. Another person, if you get angry, you take long to get angry, number one. And when you do get angry, you resolve the anger very quickly and you move on. وَشَهْوَةُ بَطَنِ, and the desires of the tummy. وَفَرْجٍ, and the desire of one's private organs. سَلِمَ مِنْ غَيْرِهَا. He says that if you're able to, so according to Ibn Shash, if you're able to save yourself from these qualities that was mentioned, then automatically by extension you are saved of all of the other vices which will be mentioned. So as if these are the primary vices, and make an effort to save yourself of these, and then by extension you will be saved from all of the other vices. كما أن المنجيات تكفي منها عشر أيضا. So he says, similarly, so these are the muhlikat that will cause your destruction. But what will cause you success? He says there's also 10 that inshallah if you employ these, then it will guarantee your success. Munjiyat, guarantee your success. What are they? So he says the first one he mentioned is shukr, gratitude. Being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But obviously it doesn't only mean by our tongue's lip service, but by our, both in terms of our heart, an attitude of gratitude. And then we express our gratitude. And then also we, with our tongues, and then we express our gratitude with our limbs. No. And that's the most powerful form of gratitude, is when you express your gratitude through your limbs. And when we will read through, we will come to discuss what is the proper definition for shukr, inshallah, bi'idhnillah. Then, secondly, zuhud. Zuhud we normally translate as asceticism, minimalism, sufficing yourself with a little bit of this world. And some, as we mentioned before, give a definition for zuhud, which is a very beautiful one, and it's one that I think it's fairly easy for us to adopt. They say zuhud is khalwul qalbi amma khalatul yad, that to free your heart from what your hand is free of. In other words, if it's not in your hand, then don't put it in your heart. And that is the definition given for asceticism. Which means that you can have a very nice car, it's in your hand. So if it's in your heart, look after it. You're concerned about it, fine. But if it's not in your hand, it's somebody else's hand, then don't put it in your heart. And that is the definition given for zuhud according to some ulama. Now, so shukr, zuhud, rida, contentment, happiness. And whatever Allah decreed for you, you're happy with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you can have we said before, like a Kalahari, Ferrari, you have a Jalebi as a car, but you're happy with it. Rida, you're happy with it. And then you're actually better off than a person who's driving the actual Ferrari, but he's looking to get himself a Lamborghini or whatever the case may be. Rida, to be content and happy with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Happiness, rida. Normally rida says rida bil qada. You're happy with what? You're happy with Allah, if Allah is decreed for you. Now, hub, you have love for Allah, for His Messenger, for the believers. Ikhlas, sincerity. Khushu, humbleness and humility is a condition of the heart. Husnu khuluqin, good character. Sabru bala'in, when a calamity strikes you, Allah protect us from calamities. And then your response to this calamity is you respond with patience, fortitude. I'tidalu khawfin, you have measured fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there's two wings. The one wing is of fear of Allah, and the other wing is of hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَرَجَاءُ تَوْبَةٍ, and i'tidalu khawfin wa raja'in, balance between fear of Allah and hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and tawbah, wa raja'i tawbatin, and my understanding of this would be always be in a state of repenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are the 10 munjiyat, or those qualities that will ensure your success. So may Allah grant us the tawfiq, inshallah, that we're able to adopt these qualities bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then next week bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we do meet, then we'll start with the exhaustive list. It may appear to be a little bit monotonous, but I think it's very beneficial for us to work through this list so that we can actually identify what are the qualities that we need to aspire to. And many of these qualities you may find in an objective sense that I have a semblance of this quality within me. I must thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that and develop the quality. And then we may look at the list of negative qualities, and then we find, but the semblance of these qualities are found within me, so I must do my level best to rid myself thereof. And it goes on for very long. It's like 1, 2, 2.5 pages, just listing the qualities, the good qualities that you're supposed to have, and the bad qualities that you're supposed to rid yourself of. So we'll read through that bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah willing. and we'll read a little bit about Aqlani Liberali, inshallah. 10 minutes or so, and then we'll conclude with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We started at 20 past, so now it's 50 past 10 to half an hour, inshallah. 5-10 minutes more, inshallah, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today's class feels just a little bit like very slow. I don't know if it's only me, but the brothers are in a very somber mood, and so like that. So, but alhamdulillah, maybe Ali Sahib will just kickstart the class later on with one or two of his questions. So khair, inshallah. So in terms of, we had gone through this particular section, but in brief, and we took it upon ourselves from last week and the week before to actually just read word for word in terms of the concepts, because they're so very important what is being discussed here. So to recap from last week's lesson is that it's a material analysis, and the fact that something is not subject to material analysis doesn't mean that the thing does not exist. That's the primary point. So the author gives us an example. He talks about the tongue. So the tongue has taste buds, but there are certain things that the tongue cannot determine its taste. We're not going to say it doesn't have a taste. There's another organ in the body which will assist you in terms of getting that sensation, and that is the nose. You have Dr. Sabi also, you can. Dr. Sabi, I've always been told that, is people that have, like a nose issue, there's certain things that they can't taste. You must be able to smell to taste. So this person, he can't, he's got a tongue, so, but then there's something wrong with he can't smell. So he can't taste, but if I don't have a problem with my nose, then I have that, and I experience that taste. The fact that he can't experience it because of the problem with his nose doesn't mean that the taste doesn't exist. That is the example that he gives. So if you cannot, in other words, in the Western approach is that you must be able to see, feel and touch something in order for it to be real. We're saying no. But it doesn't have to be like that. Not everything is, material things, yes, are subject to that. But there are things that exist beyond the material world, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the creator of the material world, and is not subject to the science of this world. That is the point. First point that I mentioned last. The second point, so what he's saying is, now he's saying, but this whole argument, this material argument, and we never looked at it in this way, is the argument that the devil presented to Adam alayhi salam when he was in paradise. And the material argument is always presented to counter the religious imperative. So what did Allah tell Adam and his wife? لا تقربا هذه الشجرة. Don't come close to this tree. So what does the devil do? The devil is going to present an argument to Adam that's ultimately going to dupe him into partaking from the forbidden fruit. But the author here, what he wants to do is, he's going to look at the argument from a different perspective. How is it that Adam alayhi salam was duped into that? Because the devil put in front of him that, okay, here's the imperative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but here is a material benefit that you are losing by your adherence to the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the cause of the first sin was really materialism versus the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe if you can think of an example, and Allah talks about it, we mentioned the example a number of times, but it's the same examples really that you look at a different perspective. A person at the time of Jumu'ah, where is he supposed to be? In Jumu'ah. But now what stops him from going to Jumu'ah? From what we're discussing now, what was saying, look, if I'm going to Jumu'ah, I'm going to lose this deal. I want to be able to close this deal. So what is it? It's the divine command being challenged by what? Material benefit. So the person, But it's unique that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you that material benefit, Wallahu khairul raziqin. If you're skipping the Jumu'ah because of a material benefit, then Allah is the best of those who provide for your material needs. But don't look for your material needs look for it not at this time, look for it at the time after Jumu'ah. After Jumu'ah you go. Then I will facilitate it for you. So that's the point here. Then another unique point which is, I think very important. One day my brother told me, and he was quoting Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, but he gave the English version, man. But the English version sounds nice for us because we relate to English. English is our first language. He told me, Imam Ghazali says, don't allow in the beginning what you don't want to see the end of. Now the devil's argument, the devil didn't say once off to Adam, eat from the tree. Adam said, well, Allah said I mustn't eat from the tree. The devil, had a plan. And he, step after step after step after step, he finally managed to dupe Adam alayhi salam into partaking thereof. And therefore, in terms of Quran, we says, what does Allah say? لا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان. He doesn't tell you don't follow the step of the devil, because the devil doesn't come in one step. The devil comes to you in steps, stages. So I don't know if you can maybe think of an example. The devil tells you, look man, you're just sitting on the table, man. Right? There's wine being served on the table. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything. You're just sitting on the table. Afterwards he says, but look, you're sitting on the table. They're just asking you to pass it on. So just pour for the guy next to you. Then it comes to you, look, you're not going to become a drunkard. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forgiving. Just have it once. So khutuwati shaitan. The devil comes to you and that's the point that the devil doesn't come to you once off and tells you. We have this image of the devil that he carries this, he's red and got his ears and carries the 3-prong fork and so forth. No. The devil, I don't think very rarely is going to take on that form, because otherwise he will run away from us. Khutuwati shaitan. So that's the point that we come to now. So I'm going to talk about that. And we could talk a little bit about it. And I think maybe for today's lesson that's a nice point to stop on. But the author says, وَآدَمْ لَمْ يَسْتَجِبْ لِإِبْلِيسِ وَقْتًا. Adam didn't answer or accede to the proddings of the devil for a long time. وقتا, for a time. حتى طال التسويل من إبليس وتأصيل هذا الأمر والتدليل عليه تباعا وبإلحاحا. Until طال التسويل من إبليس, over time, coaxing, and providing a proof for that. So when Adam actually partook of the truth, he came to a point where the devil duped him to a way that he felt, look here, it's not a wrong thing to do, it's the right thing to do. Most people, the nature of human beings is they won't do a wrong knowing it's wrong. You do get people like that, but they're very little. Most people, they do a wrong thing, but they've been duped into thinking it's a good thing. And therefore Allah talks in the Holy Quran, أَفَمَنْ زُيِّنَ لَهُ سُوءَ عَمَلِهِ. That person that is bad has been embellished for him. It's bad. But the bad has been embellished for him, so, that bad has been made out to appear good for that person, and that's why he does it. But if it's presented to the person as it is in reality, generally you run-of-the-mill human being, because of the intrinsic goodness found within the human nature, won't do it. So that's how the devil dupes you. So, and it's very easy to put a material benefit in front of you. So, example, the person says, how can you not take interest? That money you could have taken and you could have invested yourself. And you've actually got a much better return than the interest rate now. So in lieu of the lost opportunity of the investment, in lieu of that, you are more than justified in, charging a reasonable amount of interest. But if it's put as that is the, misappropriation of wealth, is theft. That's how the Quran looks at it. Even now, what happens in South Africa, what do we have? We have the Usury Act. Usury Act. It's no longer called usury, because usury sounds like a swear word. So what do we replace it with? Interest. Nobody wants to. Actually, there's a Usury Act which outlaws usury. I think it still stands. It may have been replaced with the National Credit Act. The Usury Act is out, and the National Credit Act is in place. I speak under correction. But there was a time when you had a Usury Act that outlawed usury. But now what happens is, let's just change. We can't call it usury, man. Let's call it interest. You understand what I'm trying to say? That a human being, that by his nature he won't do something which is bad. But what happens is that bad gets embellished and made out to be good. And like that, the human being is. That's why the devil whispers, and gives you really wacky reasons that reconfigures that which is intrinsically bad, and it appears to you to be good, and we fall for it. And that's, the first example would be the example of the devil and he's tackling Adam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be pleased with him. وَأَطْلَقَ إِبْلِيسَ عَلَى هَذِهِ شَجَرَ إِسْمًا مِنْ عِنْدِي زُورًا فَسَمَّى شَجَرَ الْخُلْدِ. And then he says, and this is unique that we're talking about user in interest now. So he says that the devil, this particular tree, or the forbidden fruit, didn't have a name. The devil fabricated a name for the tree and called the tree of eternity. Shajaratul Khuld. He made that name up himself. You with me? So now, who doesn't want to partake of the tree of eternity? It will give you eternal life. You will remain here with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All these material benefits that you can't experience, you will have that and more. All you have to do is partake of the tree. But actually what it is the devil is going to tell you, Allah told you something, I told you something, don't listen to me. He's going to say that, but not now. He's going to say that on the Day of Judgment. How does the verse go? فَلَا تُلُومُنِي وَلُومُ أَنفُسُكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَعَدَكُمْ وَعَدَ الْحَقِّ. Allah made a promise to you, and He made a true promise. وَوَعَدْتُكُمْ, I also made a promise to you. فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ. But أَخْلَفْتُكُمْ, I was treacherous. My promises were empty promises. Yeah. On the day of Badr, what happened on the day of Badr? It was the devil that, roused up the enemy to attack the Muslims with the intention of annihilating them. And then when it came on the battle, what happened to the devil? He turned on his heels and fled. And what did he say? Inni ara ma la tarawun. I see what you can't see. Inni akhafu Allah. I fear Allah. And the devil on the day of judgment said, look here, I didn't do anything. And the devil can't actually do anything. The only thing he can do is whisperings. That's the only thing he can do. And whisperings to a degree that it causes you to look at the thing something very differently. You just put the other lens on. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for your own actions. You can't blame the devil. He's going to say, look here, man, you can blame me, but you blaming me is not going to avail you in any way. All of us are in the same fix. That's basically what he's going to say. That's a direct translation of Quranic verses, not the interpretation. It's just, that's what the Quran tells. The devil is going to say, look here, what can we do? We're all in the thing. And then, what's our response to him going to be? We can curse him, yes. We can say that Allah must double the punishment for him, yes. And all of that's going to happen. But at the end of the day, we say today, it is what it is. The devil is going to say, it is what it is. Allah protect us. So here we learn فَسَمَّى شَجَرَةَ الْخُلْدِ. So you call, we were just talking about euphemisms now. And it's a bad thing, but you call it by a nice name. You're not supposed to do that, but you call it by a nice name. And then does that mean that the essential reality of that thing changes? No, it doesn't. In hiya illa asma'un. It's all names, sammaytumuha antum. In Palestine now, when we went to visit some time back, you know what the Zionists, they want to create the impression that the Jews have been there for millennia. So what they do is, they create graveyards within the old city. And like old graveyards. And what's the purpose behind that? That when you come as a tourist, it says ancient. What is ancient there? Ancient is the graveyards outside of the city hall where the companions are buried. Yeah? Ancient is Ibrahim alayhi salam being buried there and all. That's ancient. But the Palestinian told me there's no essence to these graves. These graves are fabricated. So this is reminding me of what fabrication. Here's some reality, and then the reality is that's what the devil does. And devil's got agents, human agents, and this is what they do. They do exactly what he does. No. Ya Adamu hal adulluka ala shajarati al-khulli wa mulkin la yabla. So this is where the material argument comes in. He says, Ya Adamu hal adulluka. Should I not indicate to you? Almost like I'm doing you the biggest favor. Hal adulluka ala shajarati al-khull, on the tree of eternity, wa mulkin la yabla, and a kingdom la yabla, which will never wane out. No. ويؤكد هذا بالحلف لهما بالله. And then what does he say? إني لكما لمن الناصحين. You know, if we have a little bit, and many of you do have appreciation for the Arabic language, this sentence here is so filled with punctuation, with emphasis. He doesn't say I have goodwill towards you. He says إنني, indeed I have لكما لمن الناصحين. I have a goodwill at heart. Look here, there's no benefit for me. But this is the best thing that you could ever do, man. Is to partake of this particular tree. It must sound very familiar. Even sometimes people there's something that maybe somebody wants to sell you something, but it's really not beneficial for you, man. And the guy tells you, look here, man, if I was in your place, if I was in your shoes, I'll definitely go for this one. And like that, if it's truthful, mashallah, tabarakallah, guys. But this is, the devil himself says, I am a nasih for you. Nush. And the nush, we must defer to next week, inshallah. We can talk about nush. Nush is a very big thing. We spoke about last week, we said there's 2 words in the Arabic language, that there's no more words that has more pregnant meaning in the Arabic language than falah and nush. Nush means goodwill. It's almost like the devil saying, I got no vision. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it for you. It's for your benefit. Inni lakuma la min al-nasihin. We as Muslims, we're actually commanded to have nusr for one another. So when I talk to you and I suggest something to you, I mustn't have a self-interest in it, man. It must be only for you. It's a very high maqam to reach. That when I'm dealing with people, when I say something, I just have your interest at heart. It's not about me. Because if it was about me, then I would have actually done this. Because this would benefit me more in the process. If somebody comes to you and say, you insist, like for example, in your kitchen that you want to put this and the other. He says, look, I can put it in for you. I'm going to make my money from it. But this is the impractical thing for you to put in. I can do it if you want to. That's an example of nusr. Because it might be the latest trend, this and the other, but look, it's impractical, man. But if you really insist, then I'm going to put it in and I'm going to charge you the price. But if I was you, I won't, I won't. That's an example of nusr. So the devil is telling him, Inni lakuma, for the both of you, Inni lakuma, lamin al-nasihin. I only have a goodwill at heart. So there's that passage. I think it's much more beneficial to, read the Arabic. I give you the khulasa, then a lot of things gets missed out, man. So we did a recap of the previous lesson, right? And we said is that the main thing is that the devil, the way he embellishes that which is wrong, but something which is essentially wrong. And for us, what is essentially wrong? If no matter how nice you make it appear to me, I'm giving example now. You come out of for this. It's not the right example, but it's so prevalent in our societies. You come out of. I went to have some visitors from Australia. That's what I want to tell you. 4 graduates from Australia, Perth, Alisa, They came on the weekend. They came to Joburg, came to Cape Town, and they went to Durban. Why they come? They recent graduates, but they want to see. They want to take lesson from the Islamic institutions, the Islamic establishments in South Africa, and this must will guide them in terms of what they're going to be doing now in Perth. So sometimes you ask me, like, oh, what do you somebody paying you to talk about Cape Town and Cape Town Muslims and all of that? No. There's people coming from all over the world. They come to Cape Town. They want to see what's happening here, how this and how that. Yes, we do have our problems, don't we? Yeah? But from a different perspective, a lot of the is an example for a lot of the people. So I took them to the airport. I dropped them there. When you come out, then what happens is they're advertising Cape Town, man. There was one thing where Vodacom was advertising. They say, welcome to Cape Town, where cloud covers the mountain and Vodacom covers the rest. So now you must get your Vodacom. And then now there's another thing there with one of these places, man, that you're not supposed to go to, man. There's a big one there, Haji, you definitely looking at the wrong things. See there, I cut him out. I just camera also, got you also. Oh, I don't know what to do with you now. I didn't say anything. Haji was laughing there. But Haji knows what I'm talking about. The other brothers know what I'm talking about. You come out to the airport, man, there's one advertisement there. They say like the best stop in Cape Town. And look, it looks appealing, doesn't it, Haji? But now, no matter how nice you're going to make it look for me, no matter how nice you're going to make it look for me, that's haram. I'm not going to go there.
Is that the casino?
No, not the casino.
I don't know what it is.
Hey, now you're going to look for it. I mean, I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to be responsible for that. Long time, some of all the advertisements in the airport stick with me. The other one was the Volvo. When they send the Volvo out, they put a big billboard there. They say, eye candy. In other words, like, when you eat candy, it tastes nice. But if you want to give your eyes some, nice, like it must experience some felicity, then you must look at the Volvo. It's unique how, how this thing came and sticks with you. But now there's another one, Arisa. I don't even know if I can take you to the airport now so we can drive past it because it's the wrong thing now. It's calling you to one of the attractive hotspots in Cape Town which you shouldn't be going to ever. I say it's the best spot in Cape Town. Now, no matter how nice you make that look for me, no matter how you embellish it for me, no matter what sensation you're going to guarantee for me from that experience, Haji, for me, I'm going to look at what it is. It's haram. And if I didn't realize it, now I come to realize over time, I know Allah SWT told me, look, la taqrabu zina. Allah told me already. And why? Because Allah doesn't prohibit me from something except He knows it's a harm. People can make it look how nice and justify how nice. Everybody does it. It's a normal thing. Which century are you living in and all of those things. No matter how you embellish it for me, I'm not going to fall for that. And that's basically that's basic. And it's a material appeal. And the material appeal that the devil made for Adam alayhi salam, he's still from that time till today doing the same thing, just in different forms. So what do we say? No matter how you embellish this bad and no matter how nice you make it look, I'm not interested. Because here's the law of Allah SWT and I know that is beneficial for me. And intrinsically, if you look at it properly as a human being, the value you get from, if you can say, in this regard, a home cooked meal and that type of takeaways, can't compare. If you look at it intrinsically, subhanAllah. May Allah grant us the tawfiq, inshallah. We'll continue next week a little bit further. I think maybe Alisa, we must have made it a wajju and a special dua for us there on the second half, so we, the engine started, moving up, alhamdulillah. Allah bless you.
Actually, something that's quite interesting, the second part of the lesson, the similarity of sales to the shaitan. How shaitan can actually sell you this.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same example, but I didn't want to mention it, man, because it's a bit tricky. But you do find people, like, for example, I've met, like, for example, an Islamic broker. He says, look here, I don't want to sell you the policy that's going to make me the most money. I want to sell you the policy that's going to work for you. Now, those are few and far between. So now that is nus. That is, like, you can quickly fool a person into saying that this is the best thing. It's the best thing for you. It's the best thing for me. And so it talks about the nus, and it talks about also how you have to embellish that thing for that person. That you must put it across something that this person sees almost like, how can I actually live without this? You know, in terms of the sales, how can I live without this?
But that's a unique thing in Cape Town. If you look at people, professionals, most of them don't want to do sales. Right? They don't want to be labeled as a salesperson. So it's kind of a unique thing in Cape Town that almost like intrinsically they shy away from it. You know, so maybe something to do with society and the upbringing, Islamic upbringing,
Wow,
that has an impact there.
that's a unique observation.
Yeah. That's the one comment. The other comment is on the list of 10 illnesses. I mean, do people actually, is there many people that overcome that illnesses, or are we all like kind of at different stages of beating these illnesses? Because I think of, you know, the desires of the tummy, and I think, okay, this year I'm good, you know, but next year I'm losing it, you know what I'm saying? So,
It's
quite interesting.
our scholars say that, you know, when you start off like with one, like tackling one at a time, but it's not like chronological that, you know, you tick them off, and the moment you conquer it, now it comes back to you in different ways. So it's a very cyclical type of process. You always, you know, but sometimes in your life you'll find that you conquer the one, only to be met with the other one right in front of you. Like you conquer laziness. You know, like, for example, now I conquer my laziness. Now, for example, I don't pray at home. Right? I pray at home for the past 10 years. Now I conquer my laziness, I come to the masjid. MashaAllah. Spiritually grow. On my way back, I say, but the masjid is so empty, and I start looking at all the houses of who's not coming to the masjid. I look like that right now. So it's just because now that you've come to a next level. It's like Mario Brothers, man. You know, play Mario Brothers. Now you go to the first level, now you come to the next level. It's different challenges put in front of you. So now what must happen is your obedience to Allah mustn't lead you now to have a low opinion of other people. You must tarahum, yeah, inshallah. Like me, I hope everybody else can come to the masjid. But so you know, the moment you get off one stage, then you meet up with another stage. And it's a lifelong battle. So initially the idea is to maybe like work through a list, you know, in terms of do's and don'ts, right? But then life is like that it's just, you know, it gets you, but I do think that it's an ongoing process, but you do work through stages. You do work through stages. And that's refinement. It's not like also that I'm going to, you know, every time. No, you actually work through stages and you get better. And you like for example, like somebody's got a new car. I don't know, this was my experience. Somebody got a new something, whatever the case may be, man. Then I like say, mashallah, man. But the mashallah sounds a bit hollow to me even, man, saying it. But then me, I say mashallah louder, man, and like, you know, and wallahi, there comes a day where you can say to that person, mashallah. Nah, quite. But nothing. The guy shows you he's upgrading the phone. Now you say, yo, we can also get a phone like that. No, mashallah, tabarakallah. You know, you happy that you got the phone? I'm happy for you, mashallah. And you can, you know, so it starts off with a little bit of, you know, fake it till you make it almost like type of thing. But then you, mashallah, it gets fuller as you go along. Because Allah won't disappoint you. You take a step to Allah, Allah will help you. So it's an ongoing thing, but not ongoing that you're always on base one. You move through the stages, but like again, the stages sometimes just gets a bit more difficult, man. You know, because you're getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's bound to get more, you know, difficult and so forth, but you do progress. And it starts with small steps. And that's why it's unique to learn these things, man. And for me, the most amazing thing is that when you can actually, there's a term for your problem. If you think about it, then there's something in you that you even, it's a reality, but you haven't actually even thought about it as such, but it's within you. When you hear it, you say, okay, that's my problem, and there's a name for it. Actually, Islamic spirituality actually has a name for the problem which I have. Nobody knows about it. But I, you know, that's that thing there, that's here. Allah. Allah protect us and grant us a tawfiq, and this is it's a journey that we must take and embrace, and we're not never too young, never too old to Actually, I think the older we are, the better we are in a position to reform, because we have this experience, you know. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallah, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.